Welcome back. There's a lot of talk about the growing clout of unions, as it feels like this summer was also strike season. But what is the state of organized labor in Canada? Here's a look by the numbers. So far in 2023, there have been 99 work stoppages, average length 56 days, affecting 135,644 workers. That is not a high water mark. Pre-pandemic, that was set back in 2015. 237 work stoppages, lasting an average of 64 days, kept 428,802 people out of work. One thing is for sure, union rates have fallen over time, from 38% of total workers in 1981 to 29% in 2022, a decline of 9%. Of course, the big drop was in the private sector, the percentage of male workers in private sector unions dropping from 31% in 1981 to 19% in 2022. It held steady in the public sector at about 66%. Women are more likely to be in union jobs. 53% of union employees are female, 47% are male, and the highest rates of unionization are in education, government, and healthcare. Wages are affected by unions. Employees covered by a union in 2021 had an average wage of $33.19 an hour, compared to $28.62 per hour for non-union employees. And while full-time jobs saw that 11% decline in unionized workers in the 30-year period, part-time jobs climbed, up 3% in the same time. Well, there's no question that a few high-profile strikes are getting a lot of attention this summer, but is worker power really on the rise? Barry Sawyer is National Council Vice President for the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, the country's largest private sector union. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Amanda.
So let's start right there. I mean, does it feel as though the issues are more front and center and that workers have a bit of clout right now?
So definitely we're seeing an uptick in worker engagement and people reaching out to us, attempting to become unionized or, like I'll say, feeling out the process of becoming unionized. And I would say that workers do have a little more power. However, all the large companies are quick to remind us at the bargaining table that they believe inflation rates are going down and they don't want to get locked into some of the large increases or the asks that the members have asked us to try to get recently.
So it's interesting. We just showed the data, although it feels like there's tons of strikes happening. We're not actually anywhere near the number that we saw in 2015. So it's not a high watermark, particularly so far, for number of stoppages or workers involved. But the numbers involved, and I'll just focus on wages for a second here, it does sort of point to, Barry, a lot of catch up, right? There was a lag in inflation over time, and now to get to kind of level, there are huge increases that are required. That actually speaks to me of a lack of power over time. In other words, that there was that gap that was building.
So, I mean, I'll call that a fair analogy, that over time, definitely when cost of living or those numbers, which can be swayed, statistics can be played very many ways, but definitely the employers at the bargaining table were saying, inflation's low, cost of living is low and all that stuff, and therefore their offers for increases on wages over time haven't been as high as we would like, right? And now we've all experienced life post-COVID and how the cost of everything has gone up, and now the workers our members are asking us to try to catch them up as much as possible.
Wages is one piece of it, but of course we see, and we saw this in the port strike, we see it elsewhere, that the concern for job security is actually a big part of the process here. How much room is there to negotiate for the future when things like new technologies, including things like AI, will come, and they really will be these efficient things businesses want to implement to save money and boost profit, but that may cost jobs? How much can we protect against that today?
So you're accurate in saying that that's a worry for all workers in all industries. Every day we're surprised at how much AI can do. In the industries that we represent, we've been working hard, and we've actually over time had, I'll call it technological advanced language put in many of our contracts, so that when technology comes in, and I'll just use in a meat processing plant where we used to have people standing over a wrapper and wrapping them, and now there's a a robot or a computer kind of thing, doing that. We've bargained in language that protects the workers so that they have to be retrained and do other tasks. Mm-hmm. That's not perfect, and we don't have it in every collective agreement, but that's definitely a goal of ours. And your point about wages being one of the top issues, it's not the only top issue. There is the AAI situation. There's also scheduling and flexibility, because people learned through COVID that workers or workplaces could do this a little more often, and that's at the top of the bargain list too. And then there's also respect for in our case, retail workers and meat processing workers who were deemed as heroes all through the COVID time, right, are saying, hey, how come you're not treating me like a hero now? Right? So
very interesting. Barry, so good to have you for this. It's really important perspective.
Yeah, thank you.
Barry Sawyer is National Council Vice President for the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. So over time, it does seem as though being part of a union increases wages and benefits. Does that therefore translate into that being good for the overall economy? Kendra Strauss is Director of the Labor Market Program and Professor at Simon Fraser University. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start there. I mean, we know that that coverage by a union increases wages. Does that mean, therefore, employees necessarily benefit by increased union membership?
Well, certainly in terms of wages, the empirical evidence is pretty clear that there's a union advantage. But of course, it also provides an advantage in terms of things like coverage of benefits, so extended health care, that kind of thing. So I think what's important to remember right now is the kind of cost of living crisis and inflation that we're seeing. There's pretty good evidence that it's not actually driven by increased wages, and that actually wages are what's struggling to keep up right now for workers, and that includes unionized workers.
And of course, we've seen in the negotiations big catch-up in place. There are other issues on the table here that I wonder if they're not going to become more pressing as we go forward. Things like new technologies replacing workers, being trained in new skills. We're seeing that creep into the negotiations. Can we negotiate our way to this, or are businesses going to have to be more flexible in the future?
That's a really good question, and I think one that's really crucial for the labor movement right now. What we're seeing is unions and workers seeking protections from technological change that displaces workers. We saw that as a key issue in the port strikes in Vancouver recently. And so it's certainly something that unions are trying to help workers negotiate protections around. The question is the extent to which those protections are going to preserve jobs in an environment, where we're seeing technological change on a global scale. It's not just localized. So, I don't necessarily have an answer to that, but it's certainly one of the key challenges for unions and for workers at the moment.
We've obviously seen the rise of another kind of work, Kendra, and that is, of course, what we would call, the gig economy jobs. Are they even employees? Has been a question. Do we expect to see more precarious work in the future, or can we reverse that trend?
Well, that is a big question. And I think one of the things we're grappling with right now is whether kind of app-based work, platform-based work needs to be inherently precarious. It can certainly offer things that workers want and need, like flexibility. Mm-hmm. But when workers are not employees, it often means that they're excluded from protections, including minimum wage, for example, but also occupational health and safety protections. So I think the challenge we're facing is, how do we offer or protect the flexibility that workers might want and need, but also ensure that the protections are in place so that the minimum standards that we agree all workers should have access to are also in place for gig workers. And, without that, I think we will see a continued rise in precarious employment.
So good to have you with us. Appreciate your time today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Kendra Strauss is Director of the Labor Studies Program and a professor at Simon Fraser University. Coming up, Saudi Arabia is pouring billions into international sporting franchises. Is that cause for concern? That's still ahead. But first, we may have reached peak billionaire. Elon Musk has challenged Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg to a cage match. Both men are trained in martial arts, and Musk has even promised to live stream the event. The verbal sparring started when Zuckerberg called his new social media platform Threads a Twitter killer, prompting Musk to throw down the challenge, though he has since suggested he needs surgery before getting into the cage. But whether it actually happens or not, we can't help thinking both men have better things to do, or at least we can think of a few things if they need ideas. We're back after this.